Recapping our top story today, William Lai from Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party was sworn in as the island's president this morning. As leader, he faces a number of hurdles, including a fractious parliament at home and dealing with a China that views him as a separatist, advocating for Taiwan's independence. Now, let's take a deeper look at the medical doctor turned politician's journey to the island's top job.
William Lai was the mayor of Tainan City in southern Taiwan between 2010 and 2017. During his time in Tainan, he earned the nickname Lai Shen, or Lai God, for his efficient running of the local government. A wildly popular politician, when Mr. Lai sought re-election in Tainan in 2014, he won by securing the highest vote share in the history of Taiwan's local elections. Rival politician Ko Wen-je of the Taiwan People's Party once described his popularity as the result of diligence, not divine power. Internationally, the Harvard alumnus and son of a coal miner is better known for his controversial position over Taiwan's sovereignty. In 1996, as Taiwan was transitioning to democracy, Mr. Lai quit medicine to enter politics. The next year, Mr. Lai, who was 38 at the time, held a placard high during a session in the now-defunct National Assembly. The Chinese characters on the placard say, "Long live Taiwan's independence." He later described himself as a pragmatic worker for Taiwan's independence. The image has stuck with him ever since and prompted Beijing to brand him as a dangerous separatist.
Well, for more insight on Taiwan's new leader, we now speak with Alexander Huang, Professor of Strategy and Wargaming at Tamkang University, as well joining us, CNA's Victoria Jen in Taipei and Olivia Seong in Beijing. A warm welcome to all of you. First to you, Victoria. You heard the inauguration speech this morning. What were the key takeaways that could reveal or give hints of what a Taiwan under a William Lai government might look like?
Well, there haven't been any major surprises in his inaugural speech. Basically, William Lai has reiterated that he wants to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait by maintaining the status quo. And also he wants to follow the former President Tsai Ing-wen's policies. So we're expecting that things are likely to stay the same. And under the circumstances, that would mean that there is not likely to be any breakthrough in cross-strait relations, because we know that China considers the One China principle the basis for peaceful cross-strait relations and also the precondition for cross-strait dialogue. And as long as William Lai does not recognize the One China principle, that we are likely to see the cross-strait relations to continue to further deteriorate.
Ollie, China as well would have been closely watching the speech this morning from the man they're calling a separatist. How is that playing out in China today?
Jill, you know, as the inauguration was taking place in Taiwan here on the mainland, there was silence. There was no reports of the inauguration taking place here in local media. And when I looked on Chinese social media websites like Weibo, there were restricted comments and content had been restricted, pointing to the sensitivity of the issue. But I did go out and spoke to some locals here and asked them, did they know that there was an inauguration happening in Taiwan? Many of them said no, they were not paying attention to it, and some couldn't even name who the next Taiwan leader was. But still, when I asked them how they felt about cross-strait relations, all had a range of views that they offered. Have a listen.
我觉得还是要坚持和平啊，因为和平来之不易嘛。而且台湾本来就是中国的，这毋庸置疑。
我不太希望我们变成俄乌或者是中东的那种关系。我觉得可能长辈，或者说有一些人，他可能对于台湾的态度是更加强硬的。对于我们年轻人来讲，没有那么大的一个 就是症结，就是心结吧。就可能对于我们来讲，我如果非常强大，我现在是世界第一，你跟不跟我在一起，其实都 OK 了。
其实对于我们年轻人来讲，就是因为台湾的流行文化比较发达吧，当时，然后可能会更多的去产生一些想交流的想法。
And, analysts I've spoken to say, now hours later after the inauguration, we have seen those official responses come in, which have largely been in line with expectations. We saw not too long ago China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi weighing in, saying that the One China principle is the anchor of peace in the Taiwan Strait, emphasizing that there is international support for the One China principle. Although there were some different dimensions also reflecting the mainland's different priorities. Now we saw in the Taiwan Affairs Office emphasizing that the root cause of current tensions is the DPP's refusal to acknowledge the 1992 consensus, also hitting back at William Lai's speech, saying it stubbornly adhered to the stance of Taiwan independence and attempts to rely on external forces and seek weapons to seek independence. This perhaps showing, according to analysts I've spoken to, the increasing concern that the mainland has over growing ties that Taiwan has with the international community. And Professor Huang, would love to hear from you, bringing you into this conversation. We know the U.S. had an unofficial delegation at William Lai's inauguration, and Beijing has been concerned about what it seems to be growing international support from the U.S. and its partners for Taiwan. How do you see this playing out with William Lai at the helm? How do you think Beijing is going to respond?
I think the presidential inauguration is another celebration of Taiwan's democratic achievement. Taiwan's image has been presented to the world that attract international attention. I think on that part, we appreciate that as a Taiwanese. But on the other hand, William Lai's inaugural speech this morning has shown that he had 1 or 2 inches even further away from former President Tsai Ing-wen's policy line and distant Taiwan even further from the mainland. And that would probably trigger the Chinese, decision to further pressure Taiwan. We will have to wait and see because everybody knows that there is a election in the United States coming up in November. So at this particular juncture, I do not expect a sharp or harsh response from Beijing, but we need to keep in mind that that in his speech, President William Lai did not mention a piece of legislation that defined that the mainland area and the Taiwan area under a pre-unification Republic of China. And that's our own law of the land. And he did not mention that, not like former President Tsai Ing-wen. So I believe that Beijing will have a different interpretation separate from the previous judgment of President Tsai Ing-wen. So to me, the cross-strait relations will remain to be very tense, and China will not have an immediate punitive action against Taiwan, but the beginning of the Lai presidency would take Taiwan into an even more uncertain future.
It's a very interesting, Professor Huang. And as you mentioned, the United States themselves are gearing up for their own presidential election at the end of the year. Do you see that as having a significant impact on the Lai government, depending on who comes to power?
Yeah, Taiwan, in general, Taiwan is a very pro-America society. And Taiwan's security and defense had almost totally relied on the United States security cooperation. Therefore, especially in the past few years since the Ukraine war, the Tsai government had leaned toward Washington even more. So any change in Washington, any policy adjustment, even in a small scale, will definitely have an impact and reflect it back to that how Taiwan see we can deal with Washington and how strong that we can stand up against Beijing.
Very interesting, Prof. Huang. Now, while cross-strait relations remain one of the biggest issues for the new president, the office that former President Tsai Ing-wen leaves behind presents challenges that go far beyond. We take a look at the legacy of the island's first female president.
A landslide win that made history on multiple fronts. As Taiwan's first female president, Tsai Ing-wen smashed more than just winning margin records in her 2 terms at the top job. In the 8 years under her leadership, same-sex marriage was legalized. Taiwan's GDP saw noteworthy growth, and the island tied through the pandemic with international praise. But through it all, Beijing has loomed large. Walking over her predecessor's Beijing-friendly approach, Ms. Tsai never acknowledged the One China policy, which formed the basis of cross-strait relations in the past. That plunged cross-strait relations to the lowest point in decades. In retaliation, Beijing has cut off all official exchanges with the island, further squeezed its international space, and stepped up military presence in the Taiwan Strait. To counter Beijing's pressure, Ms. Tsai introduced the new southbound policy, aimed to strengthen ties with Southeast Asia and other regions. But nothing helped like violent anti-China protests in Hong Kong and growing rivalry between China and the US. Ms. Tsai's popularity surged following China-backed crackdown of protests in Hong Kong and as the US stepped up engagements with the government. While all that was credited for handing her party a historic 3rd term in power, they have not removed unresolved issues that will confront her successor, such as Beijing's desire to move towards a political union and a slew of domestic issues, from rising costs of living to unaffordable housing that have driven dissatisfaction towards the government.
Well, let's go back to our panel now, starting with you, Ollie. Now, it's not a matter of if, but when China will tighten the screws on Taiwan. How might Beijing make things a little more difficult for Lai?
Jill, there is the short-term and the long-term response. Just this morning, as the inauguration was taking place, we saw the Commerce Ministry here on the mainland announce sanctions on Boeing and 2 U.S. defense organizations for their arms sales to Taiwan. Also, we heard reports that the Chinese military continued to fly its aircraft in the Taiwan Strait near Taiwan, with the DPP's refusal to acknowledge the 1992 consensus, which Beijing feels is the basis for dialogue. It's quite unlikely that we will see any sort of a resumption of official communication. And it's like, as Victoria and Professor Huang have said, that these tensions are likely to remain. And then when we talk about the long-term response, we do know that even Chinese President Xi Jinping has linked the reunification with Taiwan to national rejuvenation and the Chinese dream, saying that this is inevitable. Professor Huang, in your opinion, though, is there anything that could trigger a more forceful response from Beijing, given that it will also be mindful of international repercussions if it chooses to move on Taiwan?
Follow up what you have introduced and told our audience. I have to say that Beijing has a huge toolbox and with so many items in it. And since the election in January of President William Lai, during the 4 months of transition, we have witnessed a stepping up of pressure over cross-strait relations over Taiwan, but without triggering an international reaction. For instance, they lifted the preferential tariff treatment for some business Taiwan investors in China. For instance, they refused to give the M503 international flight route a more break. And they also had exercised the coercive normalized combat readiness patrol, cross the median line and getting closer to the 24 nautical miles perimeter near Taiwan. In addition to that, right now, Chinese Coast Guards and their maritime militia would get into the restricted waters that surrounding our offshore islands, Quemoy and Mazu. So these are the pressure that Taiwan can feel for real. But the international community would not react to that because it's not military invasion, because it doesn't, these kind of gray zone operations or activities would only punish Taiwan, but without, really sound the alarm to the international community. That's why we in Taiwan, we think that we should be very, very careful that understand that how China can coerce Taiwan without being punished, because it does not reach the level of international response when we have so much troubles in Europe and also in the Middle East.
Professor Huang, we really do appreciate your insight. We're speaking there with Professor of Strategy and Wargaming at Tamkang University. Thank you.